Hi, and thank you so much for joining the second episode of the Data Science with Dennis podcast. I'm Dennis. I'm a chief data scientist with more than 20 years of experience. I'm also a top data science voice on LinkedIn, and I'm really glad to be able to spend another podcast with you. My first episode was very well received, got some really good commentary on it, so I'm glad to continue and keep on this podcast series going. As always, my goal is to make these podcasts a single take. It's just me talking about different things in the data science world that catch my eye, different articles, different things that are happening. I do very little editing on these. This is just me talking to you about some of the things that I'm maybe keeping an eye on or things that I see developing in the world of data science. I'm very passionate about this world, so I'm happy to put these items together because it's really things that I would be doing anyways. I would be reading these articles and just kind of keeping up with news on my own. So I'm happy to share it with you as part of the podcast. So part of my goal is to pick 3 to 5 stories every week that kind of catch my eye, and then I'll bring them to you. And if you want to put something in the comments or send me some sort of feedback, I'm on all the major social media platforms. Please feel free to follow me on any of those. Feel free to also please click on the like and subscribe in whatever player or device you're listening on, because it really helps the channel grow, the podcast grow, and I thank you for that. So I'm looking over on the side of my screen here. I see that I have 4 different items that I'd like to cover today. 4 different things that just kind of caught my eye. I want to start by talking about some of the no-code apps that are out there. I have a fairly strong coding background. I did a lot of application development early on in my career. Really, part of the reasons why I started looking at other careers and looking at data science was because I felt like I had done just about everything you could do. I was a specialist in the .NET framework, and there's very few things you can mention in .NET that I haven't done, that I haven't had experience with. So, looking back now on the software development side of things, and looking at some of these no-code apps that are out there, wow, I have really been impressed. I spent some time looking at Bubble.io. I had a colleague approach me about an app idea that they had, and it made me wonder if I could point them in that direction for a no-code app. So that's why I kind of started researching this. But I was very impressed by some of the no-code apps out there, again, by Bubble.io. I'm not sponsored by them. This isn't any sort of paid placement. I was genuinely impressed by what they're offering. What really impressed me was that, 2 things. One is that I think somebody who's reasonably smart, even with no code experience, really can develop some fairly sophisticated applications on there. They're going to need some guidance, and there's tutorials out there. But you can develop some fairly sophisticated applications. The way that they've encapsulated everything with the GUI and the database and the queries, it's really impressive. The second thing that also impressed me was, I kind of hate to say this because I hope that they don't change it, but how affordable it is. When you look at some of the costs that they offer, yes, it looks expensive, right? But when you consider that they are giving you the front end, the middle layers, and the database on the back end, kind of in this one package that they handle and then they scale on their end, it's kind of a bargain. Again, I hate to say that because I don't want them changing their prices, but when you consider what it would cost you to piece all of that together yourself, they have a pretty interesting value proposition. So I was a little surprised that Bubble.io has been around as long as they have, because you would think that they would get more prominence, or certainly that more of their apps would get more prominence. Now, I know that they have a couple that are really huge and all that, so I know that. But I would have really thought that people would be doing more with that. I might still do something there with some of their apps, because when I think about what it would take me to write the front end, to make sure that it's supported on multiple platforms, to write the API layers, to write the database, they're making that super convenient for you. So maybe something for you to consider, something to keep an eye on. But again, I'm just surprised that the no-code apps have advanced so much. Really a pleasant surprise. The second item that I think has caught some attention, in fact, I think some of this went viral, was around Adobe and the terms of use. Now, there was a little bit of a viral message that went out where people were panicking that their digital works, their digital creations on the Adobe suite of tools were going to be used in generative AI. But Adobe came out and made some fairly direct statements on the updates to their terms of use. And I wrote two statements that caught my eye in their terms of use that they released. Well, they released their terms of use, and then they released this additional like press release or whatever you want to call it, this bulletin on top of that. And they said two things. One, that it emphasizes that it never has and never will use their user data to train Gen AI models. That is huge. Second is it says, not only do we not use your data for Gen AI models, we don't even scan user content at all. To me, those are two pretty big claims. Now, I'm not an Adobe user. I don't like the subscription software model. I don't like to support those companies. So I don't want to speak, too much to them because I'm not speaking from a position of experience. I'm not a user on their platform. But to me, these sound like two very bold statements. You know what it feels like? It feels like those things where like they make these statements and then like 5 years later, there's like a whistleblower, right, that releases the internal emails that show that, they were actually lying or things. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Adobe. I don't have any special information or anything like that. But that's what it feels like, right? Because they're making two very big, bold statements. Especially when you're talking about, some of the images that they host and all that. It's no secret that some of these companies do scan images. Google, Apple was caught doing that, scanning the images and content on the Apple drives and things like that, right? Some of they might be scanning it just for safety purposes, right? From law enforcement requests and things like that, right? That happens. So to me, those sound like two really bold claims. Obviously, I'm taking them at face value. I'm assuming that they're not lying, but we'll see. We'll see if it holds up over time. But if you're a digital content creator and you're concerned about, protecting your work, because a lot of those content creators do feel strongly about not having their data scanned or, for use by generative AI, maybe Adobe's the way to go. Maybe that platform is going to go ahead and support those content creators. But we'll see. We'll see what happens over time. This feels like a policy that could change over time, right? It's kind of at their discretion whether they continue that policy or not. They could update their terms of use again at some point. But I just thought it was really interesting that they so boldly came out and try to kill that viral story and say, nope, we don't use you for Gen AI. We don't even scan you at all. So we'll see if that holds up. The second item that caught my eye that I think that all of us as data science enthusiasts should be concerned about is about something that's being named the Sleepy Pickle hacking attack. So let's break this down. What are we talking about when we're talking about pickles? Well, when we talk about pickles, we're talking about Python, and we're talking about the pickle library that is commonly used to save different states of, pieces of code or objects. Typically, you would use a pickle file to save a model that you've developed for data science. The problem with that is that it's no secret that pickle files do have vulnerabilities, right? The way I'm not a hacking expert, and I'm not an expert in pickle files, but my understanding is that the way the files are encoded and maintained within the actual within the actual pickle files does make them vulnerable to different forms of attack. So this is not the first time that Pickle has been found to have vulnerabilities. I think it's the first outright hacking attack for data science models, but there have been cases in the past where Pickle files have been used to steal information, steal data. So the Hacker News had this really interesting breakdown of these Sleepy Pickle hacking attacks, where they are basically injecting themselves into saved model files, and they can cause the model to produce nonsensical results or really undesired results, unintended results, right? because a true hacking attack from this type of item wouldn't give you like crazy bad results, because you would know right away you're infected, right? They would give you slightly wrong results that could still have a big impact, but you wouldn't be able to detect it quickly, right? So I'm curious to see where this is going to end up in terms of safety. It's kind of, if somebody out there knows of an alternative to using Pickle for saving object files like that, let me know. But as far as I know, there really hasn't been like a competitor, if you will, to Pickle. So if you guys know of one, let me know. But, again, this isn't the first time that Pickle files have been, singled out as being vulnerable. I mean, I remember reading about Pickle attacks as early ago as 7 years ago, 8 years ago. So this is not new. So something for you to keep in mind if you are a developer, keep an eye on your model results. We should be testing our models for degradation over time, for new data. That does happen, but that same testing is how you're going to vet out and say, hey, I might have some sort of a negative injection or something happening with my Pickle file. So something to keep an eye on. The last item that I was looking at here was coming from Meta, and Meta is looking to slow down some of their AI plans in Europe due to the privacy concerns that come up when you're dealing with EU countries. This plan, where they're kind of going to slow down and pause their AI work, affects 11 different countries within Europe. It was led by the Irish Data Protection Commission. They expressed some concern about the data that Meta had access to, the data that they were scraping, whether it was personal data, things along those lines. How are they protecting personal data, or really preventing personal data from getting into the systems anyways? The EU has very strong privacy laws for individuals when it comes to their data. Now, the reason this caught my eye is because OpenAI is facing very similar problems. I've actually done a quick Data Science Minute video on this, where OpenAI is also facing an a EU complaint where they were clearly caught scanning individual data. In that scenario, one of the privacy advocates went into OpenAI, into ChatGPT, and he asked, how old am I? He provided his name and said, how old is this person? And the answer was actually incorrect. And it was incorrect because he then asked what his birthday was, and the birthday was incorrect. But obviously that indicates that there is some sort of scanning that is going on of the personal data. So it looks like both OpenAI and Meta are going to have some challenges there in the EU around what data they can and they can't take into their models. Now, keep in mind that this would only be the tip of the iceberg for these types of concerns. In both scenarios, OpenAI and Meta have come out and said, well, no, we're not interested in personal data. We're just interested in, other data, places and things, not people, right? Now, as I said in some of my earlier content, I think, they're saying that intentionally because you kind of have to say that, right? Because as soon as you say, well, yeah, we might be scanning personal data, all of these jurisdictions all around the world, not just the EU, right? But you would trigger legal alarms all across the world, because if you're saying that, then country X is going to want to apply these laws, and country Y has other laws, and country Z has different laws around retention of that data and things along those lines, right? So there's so many things that come up when you're talking about personal data. So both Meta and OpenAI take the stance of saying that they don't actually do it, but they probably do. And for now, it looks like Meta has had to slow down its expansion plans until they address this, until they provide some sort of positive resolution with the Irish Data Protection Commission because it can be a serious thing as far as the violations of the personal privacy laws that exist in the EU. So we'll see how that story develops. A lot more to come out of that for sure. A lot more to come from other countries, right? The EU is only the beginning. So we'll see where both Meta and OpenAI end up with that. Well, I want to thank you for joining me for this podcast episode. I hope you have found it informative. I will continue to produce these podcasts as different articles come up, different things catch my attention. But I hope that you're well in your part of the world. Take care of yourself, take care of your families, and I'll catch you next time.